Do you know the thing where you're like really like you're really sick, so like you like and you're sleepy and you can't think straight and you like come up with like a fiction like somehow for like the reasons that you can't sleep.
You mean like a fiction in the sense of
Like you hallucinate, not hallucinate, but like you're like delirious, like disease-addled mind is like, oh, I can't sleep until like this thing happens, and like these things are preventing me from sleeping.
What were the things?
It was like I was trying to remember. It had something to do with my date, and I was like there was some government agents involved in like in trying to like organize some kind of body double for me, and like but there was like competing government organizations or something, and somehow like this was preventing me from sleeping, and something had to like, or someone was running some kind of like counterintelligence op to like make it difficult for me to sleep, and like I can't remember. I can't construct a coherent narrative out of it.
Wait, and so this was you not dreaming?
No, it wasn't dream. I mean,
well, it was like in and out of like.
Yeah, it was like I was awake, but I was sleepy and delirious, and I was just like, this blanket is hot, and it's because of government agents like trying to, yeah.
I don't think I've ever experienced that. That's like a very.
I mean, again,
I've definitely had like half dreams, but not usually of some kind of technocratic future in which government agencies control my sleep patterns.
I mean, it wasn't. That's not what it always is. It was just in this particular instance, there were two competing government agencies that were in some way invested in me, like getting to sleep or not, and they were gonna like send a body double to Reading Terminal Market for some reason.
My
and, like,
God, that sounds horrifying.
I can't. No, it wasn't scary. It was just confusing because I wanted to sleep, and I would like.
Wow.
Because like what ends up happening is like you think that something's happening, so you have to like sate a bunch of requirements before like you can sleep. So like, oh, we just got to take care of like whatever this dude wants, and then like yeah, once this is all taken care of, I can sleep. But then like you never actually resolve the issue because like
Sisyphean.
It always like loops back somehow, and you're like, oh well, this thing got taken care of, but this thing like you need to take care of, and then you like check it off in your mind somehow, and it's like, oh, but you didn't take care of the first thing that you thought you took care of, but you didn't.
Yeah, I mean, I have those kinds of like dreams, but usually about like classes, or well, not dreams, but you know, like those. I'll have those kind of like in and out consciousness things, but usually about like it'll be like I need to do that homework.
Yeah, and it's not stressful. It's like it's just like an arbitrary checklist of ominous forces conspiring against you for reasons unclear.
I see.
Hello, and welcome to Press F to Discuss, a podcast where we play video games and then talk about them for way too long. I'm Jared.
And I'm Matthew. And today we're going to be talking about Until Dawn, which is a kind of survival horror adventure game created by Supermassive Games in 2014.
In a loose sense.
Yeah, survival horror. It's like... Well, and that's why that's like one of the classifying things that makes this game interesting, because there are like elements of the Telltale games, but also like weird survival horror aspects.
It's a
bit of an oddball, I guess, for like genre classification.
It's a David Cage game, but good. I'm just realizing now.
It is.
That was why I picked it to begin with.
Oh, wow.
Well, this is fucked up now because we're going to be releasing this before our Heavy Rain episode.
Oh my God, you're right. We are. I was just going to say, I'm like, we can even put this out after we release Heavy Rain, and then I remember that we're not going to do that.
Yeah.
Because it's around October. We're going to do spooky games for y'all.
I feel like in the last 3 episodes of this show, we've talked about some way that we've like fucked up our episode scheduling. And I'm so sorry about that.
It's completely ruined the narrative arc of our podcast.
Scheduling things is hard, and I'm not good at it.
Well,
so
yeah, and I'm worried. Just
in the canon of this show, do yourself a favor, and after the Heavy Rain episode comes out, come back and listen to this again.
It's like you ever see like the infographic for like Primer that shows the different timelines? Like, that's us.
In the beta timeline, where we actually managed to fucking schedule our shit correctly. we talk about David Cage and then this. Instead, we're just talking.
If only we could have gotten David Cage to guest in this episode.
We just did this with Tacoma too.
I know. And Nier has been pushed off so far.
Yeah, we recorded a Nier episode like 2 months ago.
I was so excited because Nier was going to be like in the same year that it came out, and now I'm like,
yeah.
It's very possible we will just not release the Nier episode until next year.
Good fucking luck with that. Oh Christ. Yeah.
Hey everybody. Welcome to our podcast. Where we have collective breakdowns about our incapability of having...
My life is in shambles. I can't schedule a podcast.
I'm just imagining how many Twitter followers I'm going to lose over this scandal.
Yeah. People are going to be furious with us.
So, Jared, what did you think of Until Dawn, a David Cage game not created by David Cage? Not that we have anything particular that we think about David Cage, because we don't have a heavy
Until
rain
the
episode.
canon of the show is confirmed and where we have opinions on David Cage.
Exactly.
Until Dawn is pretty rad. I played this game for the first time, I guess 2 years ago now.
Yeah, it was a couple of years.
I played it when I was with family, and we played it in this interesting way where, so I have 3 cousins and a brother, and like each of us ended up picking characters basically, and every time that you'd play as a character, we would like pass off the controller to them, so it like...
I hope nobody picked Jess, because she just disappears for like half the game.
Yeah, I think my cousin Andrew got her, and then like... There's a decision you can make, like, she disappears for most of the game, and then, like, the very first time that you play as her after all that, you can get her to immediately die.
Right. Yeah, she's one of the more tenuous characters for survival.
But yeah, it's like a really, like, fun, like...
And, like, unique.
Yeah, like almost like a choose-your-own-adventure game, like, or, like, book made into a game, kind of, like... I guess it's like it's got limited interaction, but that's not really a problem. Like it's just like you're controlling a horror movie, and I know people say that about like Uncharted or like a David Cage game. Like you're
my favorite horror movies are David Cage games.
Like Uncharted is like you're in an action game, or like and Heavy Rain's like, you're in this drama, but this is actually like the most like that. Like you make a variety of decisions that all feel like horror movie decisions that a character would have to make, and like you tinged with little bits of interactivity, like do I grab this ominous hand that like is just like swinging back and forth on this table forever, or do I like try and save my girlfriend, or do I like leap to safety and like doom us both to death, or anything like that? It's cool, and it's like, as a fan of horror, both good and bad, it's like it's really fun and like well executed. I think like it's really like narratively tight. I think, and like it's
in a sort of not underwhelming, but like quiet way.
Right, yeah. Because you, like, start it and you're like, I'm not really sure, like, this seems like a mediocre horror movie. Like, are they just not that good at, like, writing the plot or whatever? But then, like, as you start to see, like, how much, like, clever foreshadowing and, like, stuff is, like, built into the game from the beginning that, like, sets up the plot for the whole thing, and, like, funny, like, references to things that will happen later. It's like, like... These guys actually, like, cleverly constructed a B-movie that you can play.
Right. And I think I could see this game becoming a bit of, like, a cult favorite. I think it has the pieces of that, in the sense that it leans so heavily into that B-movie, trope-filled horror game of like, all of the... Like, you have everything in this game. You've got the Indian burial grounds. You've got serial killers. You've got a bunch of, like, sex, like, crazed teens in a remote location.
With a bunch of drama.
You've got a sanatorium. Sanatorium?
Sanatorium. I think a sanitarium is something different.
Yeah, I don't know. You've got one of those places, it's like a mental hospital. And just, like, every single trope in the book is like in this game, And on one hand, it makes people think that it's really unfocused, and there is an element of like the narrative arc of the game, like kind of takes you by surprise. But like you said, Jared, it's like there's a lot of care that actually went into it, and into its characters that like is really rewarding to see played out, even if in some ways it's like the game bills itself as very heavily promoting the idea of the butterfly effect and not the Ashton Kutcher movie.
Yeah.
Fortunately or unfortunately.
It's the difference between like a screen saying like, "Oh, the butterfly effect will determine like things that happen later down the line," whereas versus a David Cage voiceover that's like, "Thank you for playing my game."
Oh, hey, David Cage. Welcome back to the podcast.
Oh, he's on the podcast for the first time.
Oh no, you're right.
This is what our problem is.
David Cage would probably be a big fan of linear like discontinuity in our podcast narrative.
Yeah, it's great. Untraditional storytelling methods.
I'm telling you, we just got to get a primer infographic.
All right, we'll put up a timeline after this episode goes live.
Well, not after this one.
After Heavy Rain.
After all of them go live.
We'll put up one after this episode comes out, and then we'll put up a second amended one after that to like incorporate additional loops. Anyway, yeah.
But yeah, it's like a movie that you play, and in a sense, there is like reduced interactivity that like. I don't want to say it gets oversold to you. I think anybody that's played enough, like, quote-unquote, narrative branching games understands that there is, like, always going to be a trade-off of how many, like, realistic, meaningful endings can we incorporate that you can actually get to. And, you know, this game says that there are hundreds of different endings, which is, like, mathematically, possibly, technically true based on there being characters.
I mean, there's lots of ways that, like, I think this game is kind of clever in that, like, it doesn't, like, it operates like a slasher movie. Like, the endings are not like, oh, like, the plot, like, the character drama is going to, like, shift significantly. Mm-hmm. It's just, like, different people will survive or die. Like,
and there are really interesting ways to, like, ratchet up the tension or, you know, or not based on that kind of movement. And that's part of why, like, slasher movies are so, like, amusing to watch is the way that they can play out in both a really trivial and kind of interesting way with their characters.
Right, yeah. And so, like, I think in some ways, like, it gets away with, like, yeah, there's not, like, infinite ways that anything can pan out, and, like, some choices aren't choices. Like, one thing that I realized was really clever the second time around was, when you get to like the Saw style death game, where you have to pick between
Josh.
You have to pick between
Ashley?
Rami Malek and whatever.
I want to spend a full 20 minutes of this podcast just gushing over Rami Malek.
He's a sweet boy.
I have the biggest crush on him. And he just gives it his all.
Yeah, he like Nicolas Cage style, like goes in hard. Like,
and it's not like he can't act well, because like you've seen Mr. Robot.
Yeah,
like, you understand like this is a guy that has like legitimate acting chops, but he knows what he's doing here. And he knows what the game is, and it's so beautiful.
Yeah, it's great. He like plays like a lunatic, like creepy, like. It's so funny.
So creepy.
It's so funny how unsubtle he is. Like, he, like, implies to, like, every different couple, I think, that he would watch them fuck at some point.
Yeah, he's just like, hey, buddy, like, do you want me to help you get laid so I can, like, check it out? Because I would totally, like, check that out.
Which I think is funnier. Like,
it's so funny.
It's funny in that, like, in a narrative context, too, because, like, he's clearly, like, trying to pretend to be normal, like, so no one suspects anything, and, like, this is what he thinks normal is. Like...
It's so good. I mean, and honestly, just, like, the amount that we're cracking up over this, I feel like, is representative of, like, how, like, stupidly enjoyable this game is.
Right, yeah.
It's like, and I can imagine, like, with your family, it probably was a blast as well, because it's just, like, there's something so charming and ridiculous about it, even when it's like when people watch horror movies and they're like, don't go in there or whatever, and it's like sometimes people get annoyed by that. That's what I love about horror movies, is how like ridiculous they can be, and that this is like that played out, and I even get to like be a part of that.
Right, yeah.
And with multiple people, especially, I mean, so I derailed you. We were talking about Josh and Ashley.
Oh yeah. What I was just gonna say was like when you make that choice, like you pick a person, but then you have to flip a switch, and it's not super clear like what direction will like kill what person, and the answer is no matter what you do, Josh dies because like that's how he set it up.
Right.
So like
you did air quotes there, and that was air quotes around dies.
Yeah. And like it's and so your choice there is like set in stone, but like it makes you think that there is a choice, like, oh, like what if I'd like done something else? But then there is also like small stuff, like saying yes or no to like going up to like a radio tower for help will result in like a character like either having the item they need to like save themselves or just dying.
Right. And it's an interesting like balance that's threaded. Well, actually, first I want to just point out that I chose the correct option in my opinion in the death of Josh and Ashley, because I chose Josh would die, but then I just didn't do anything, and then the machine just proceeded as expected, and it killed Josh.
Yeah, right.
And I felt very good with my choice because I felt like it was like the trolley problem, but I specifically wanted it to happen that way.
The apathetic trolley problem.
It was like a trolley problem where I don't even have any moral opposition to just letting people die.
Yeah.
Right, and so it's a delicate balance that gets walked with the game, where you have to be able to present choices to the player that feel significant, and they can be significant, but they also might not be.
Right. Yeah.
And so you have to be able to like lead a player along the sense of ownership of their choices without always necessarily giving them that ownership. And then, as a consequence of not always giving them that ownership, not making them lose interest in the stakes that you've set up.
Right.
And the game does a really good job of that. And I don't like quite know what exactly it is that it does. I think it's probably like the decent, like we said, like the pretty solid character work that kind of quietly is done in the background.
Right. Yeah.
And again, the aforementioned hamminess of the game, where it's just like I'm having a good time. I want to see where this goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's like, versus something like more ridiculous, like with Heavy Rain or whatever, where it's look, it's already happened. Like
I just wanted to go like Sean. I was like, I don't want to clip out the mic, but I still want to do it at like just the top of my lungs.
I'm pretty sure we already did it in the Heavy. All
right. I'm sure we did.
Right, I'm not referencing the future anymore. But whereas that one seems to have like this kind of like self-seriousness about it that like kind of makes it like it's that's ostensibly like a serious game, like where
for adults.
Yeah, for adults, where spoiler alert, I guess, dude tries to put a drill like somewhere that it probably should not be, and like you're supposed to take him seriously as an antagonist even in that scene.
Yeah.
Whereas this is just like, yeah, fuck it, like it's just full of like fun, like interesting micro decisions that may or may not matter. Like there's big stuff like, oh, do I trust this guy or not trust him? But there's also like, oh, do you climb directly up this cliff, or do you like take the long way around and like maybe lose some time when someone like could be in danger?
Took the long way home.
Thanks.
Just getting some Supertramp
thanks,
in there.
Supertramp. Yeah.
Hopefully they don't DCMA us, request royalties for this episode.
And it's just fun because it's like you've effectively turned those like tension like. You bombard the player with so many decisions that like it's not clear which ones do or don't matter.
Right.
And like I think that's clever. Like, I think that's a valid way of like one, keeping you constantly invested, because you're not just like doing quick time events until you reach a choice. Mm-hmm. It's like you're constantly making small decisions about like how do I want to approach this.
Yeah, and like quick time events themselves may be choices, like not even in the sense that a choice is time, but in the sense of like whether or not you choose to pull a trigger could be a quick time event that is also going to have narrative choices.
That's true. There's a great one that like fucked me up the first time I played the game. I was playing as who's the nerd guy?
Chris.
Is that right, Chris? Yeah.
Glasses.
Yeah, that's Chris.
Really wants to get laid, and Josh wants to watch.
Yes, that's the one.
Because Ashley's really hot.
There's a scene where you like go to rescue Josh, and like the Wendigos are out, and
Which a Wendigo, just I don't know how many people are familiar with Native American like folklore, but a Wendigo is like this like creature. Basically, it's like a spiritual manifestation in the form of like a super powerful like night stalking monster.
right, yeah, and so you basically like everything goes wrong, and you get chased back to the lodge like with a Wendigo on your tail, and there's this great choice at the end where like the Wendigo, you have a shotgun, so you're like constantly like shooting it to like knock it away so you can like escape, and it like leaps at you, and you can shoot at the Wendigo, or you know that they're vulnerable to fire, and there's like a gas tank, but it's like further away on the screen, and like if you get caught up in indecision about like, oh, do I shoot the Wendigo or do I shoot like that, like the Wendigo kills you, and that's what happened to me the first time I played the game.
Oh, you
like,
lost Chris?
Yeah.
Oh.
He got his head cut off or something.
Nice. There are a lot of very intense death scenes in this game, but we'll get to that.
Yeah. And like that's fun. Like it doesn't take like its character drama seriously. So like when a character dies, it's like, oh man, that's kind of fucked up, but like not
enough that it completely upsets like the chemistry and movement of the narrative.
Right. Yeah. I mean, the narrative's pretty static, like regardless of who
Right.
does or doesn't die.
Yeah, and I think it's worth like we've said a couple times, it's like interesting how the game balances being able to make its characters / protagonists expendable like that without necessarily sacrificing their actual like character development.
Right. Yeah.
Like it results in, even though the game, like you said, the game narrative is like pretty static, it ends up feeling very dynamic because every choice you've made, theoretically, like if this is your first time playing, especially, every choice you've made has had like elements of consequences that got you to this point, and you have this sense of ownership about it.
Right. Yeah.
And even the second time around, if you are aware of how it didn't matter, you still like can't really quite be mad at the game for like having tricked you that well.
Yeah, because again, like I can't like understate how clever it is that the stakes are not like, oh, the whole narrative is going to change. Just like, oh, this person's going to die.
Right.
Like that is like you know, versus Telltale's like, oh, like Rachel will remember that or some fucking shit.
Right. And the comparisons to Telltale, I mean, Telltale is just interesting because of how like formulaic.
I feel like we rag on Telltale a lot on this.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm not their biggest fan, but my point is, I wonder if there's something about the fact that Supermassive Games just like came in and made this game and it wasn't built on an existing IP, and it wasn't like coming out of a line of a number of Telltale games that kind of have the same structure that allowed it to have more mobility.
Yeah.
But right, and so it's just the stakes are like, I think there is like occasionally there'll be like a butterfly effect like symbol that comes up that'll be like, this was the result of an action.
Yeah.
You know, in an icon form, not words exactly. And I think that can be an overblown technique to make players feel like they matter.
Right.
But by and large, this takes like a relatively hands-off approach to just being like, after the game tells you very clearly, like multiple times, like your choices matter, and like there are millions of different ways that this will happen. Like it just kind of happens. And like you said, obscuring that which choices are significant based on just the sheer amount of choices that you have to make, some of which matter, some of which don't. It's an interesting technique that kind of plays a trick on a player in a way that still is really compelling.
Yeah, it's just fun, you know, without repeating myself too much. And like, it's the kind of thing that like rewards revisits, I guess.
Yeah, I agree. I was wondering if you were gonna like be bored out of your mind when we replayed, because we did the same thing where we kind of handed off the controller, and you gave me the controller a couple times out of sequence when it was like really like significant things that you wanted to see how I handled.
Yeah.
But I can imagine it would be like a blast to watch people play it.
Right,
especially like live or not live, but like in person rather than like a Let's Play or online, just because you like get to see like the stupid ways that we like interpret the game presenting its choices to us, and then like make choices that are sometimes significant, sometimes not.
Or even just like genuinely frantic moments that it's really fun to watch people like do those like high stakes sequences, like the bit where who's the jock guy? Mike, yeah. Where Mike is running to save his girlfriend, and like if you
Jess?
Yeah, Jess. And like like having played through before, like, oh, if they fuck up like once, like she dies.
Which you did that sequence, right? Or
yes.
did I do that sequence?
I did that sequence because I wanted to see how well I could do it.
Right.
But it's fun to watch because it's like the person playing it is really into it because it's like really fraught, and you could be like hit with like a quick time thing at any moment, or like but you also know that there's something at stake, so it's still like exciting to watch someone else do it. I think it rewards a lot of that, like that stuff and to some degree, like I recognize like how the game feels smaller once you've played through it once, but like it's still like it's not that small. Like there's a bunch of ways that like things can go down, and it's not like every character has like one place they can die and like you just clear that and it's whatever. It's like,
not every character. There are a couple characters that can like are guaranteed to survive up until the end, at which point there's a
no matter what, you'll make it to the end of the game. Like there's a couple. I think Mike might be like invincible or not.
Mike and Hayden Panettiere, or however you pronounce her name. What was her name in the game?
Sam.
Yeah, yes.
I think Mike and
Sam are invincible up until the final sequence, at which point they can still get killed. A couple of characters are like super fragile.
Right. Yeah. Again,
pretty
like
much everybody gets Matt killed.
Yeah,
from what I understand.
Like try to save your girlfriend, no go. Like
that'll get you killed.
But yeah, so it's got a lot of like depth to it, and I guess in saying that, I also want to talk about like how like tightly like its narrative is constructed.
Yeah,
like, I mentioned that before, but like
it's really like solid.
Yeah, like from minute one, like it's laying on like stuff about it doesn't feel like a narrative that contains like evil like Native American spirits and a sanitarium and an old mine and a serial killer.
I forgot
like,
the old mine.
Yeah, and like all this stuff. Like it doesn't feel like that should like work cohesively, but it does.
It totally does. And like there are people, I think, I mean, I understand if people that play the game feel like it doesn't, but I think there's a very strong case to be made that it sets up a lot of elements really effectively,
right? And
then it plays them out very straight in a way that like is completely like justifiable. Like the way that the Wendigo, the creation of, so the Wendigos are created because of death through a person who like commits cannibalism.
Yes, that's right.
And so this is like then that's directly a result of the old mine where some people got trapped.
Yeah, so they had to eat the corpses of each other, and yeah.
But that connects back to like the sanitarium and how its proximity to the mine, and the serial killer is a consequence not of actual like having a serial killer, but because of death by Wendigos that caused Josh to go crazy, and it's just there's all these interweaving parts that like admittedly take like hairpin turns, but it feels very much actually like I don't know if you've ever been on an automated haunted house, but it feels very much to me like an automated haunted house where you're just like going through these different segments and they're all one house, but you're going to be in like a weird medical area at one point, and it just complements perfectly that sense of disorientation.
Well, it's clever because like they set up these different things in a way that like they like put the like seeds of like what the whole plot is down really early, and also they like misdirect you in a way that feels like it makes you think that the whole thing is contiguous in a different way than it actually is.
Right.
So while most of the cast is still dealing with this whole like serial killer thing,
Mike.
yeah, Mike is like trying to find Jess, and so he ends up going to the sanitarium where there's a mysterious person wandering around with dogs, and you're like, oh, that's the same person.
They're
that
wolves,
yeah,
actually.
Whatever, wandering around with wolves, and
It's
like
important.
and you're like, oh, like that must have been the same person that like has been doing all this shit at the house.
Right, the serial killing, which the game, yeah, like there are a couple of very classic horror movie serial killer shots where you see the house in the background and like the serial killer steps forward in the foreground, and the game, yeah, does like clever things like that to direct you towards that conclusion.
Yeah, and it makes you feel like it's a coherent narrative in a different way than it actually is, and like when it finally like pulls the rug out from under you and like, oh, there's actually like creepy monsters, then like your understanding is such that you can like shift from one way to the other. It takes a long time for the Wendigos to show up. Like
Right.
you don't see a Wendigo like
Formally.
yeah, on screen until like chapter 7 or 8.
Yeah, like the 2/3 point.
Yeah. Like you get the one scene where Jess is being like yanked out the window, but you don't get a good look at it, so it's not clear. And that's also clever because that's like that tiny hint of like, oh, maybe your understanding of this situation isn't what it appears.
Yeah, exactly. It's like you constantly are fed these breadcrumbs of like you should be able to piece it together, and some people do. And there are also clues scattered around that you can, if you really look around, you can supplement that. And I think that actually, I don't know if that leads to different endings either, but like I think collecting more clues leads to different. Right, for Josh, like collecting more clues leads to different like endings and stuff. And you can like find these different pieces of things if you really look around, but there's always enough stuff that's fed to you that you can figure it out. But
Right.
the game always feels like the narrative it's feeding to you as the actual narrative is coherent enough that you are like you can take it for granted. And you can just say like, okay, so like there's a serial killer, and like kind of put out of your mind the fact that you just saw like a woman get yanked through a door through like
Right.
this explosive unseen force that clearly can't be a human, but like you don't really have time to process that because you're yanked right back into the serial killer.
Sure, yeah. And like, the way that different characters like meet up, like oh, Sam meets Mike in the basement of the house because like the house is connected to the sanatorium, so like clearly they like that must be how the killer gets about, but it's not. It's something else entirely.
Right.
And it's just like these like constant like clever misdirects, and like it's also nice how much at the end it still feels grounded in like the parts, like the things that it started with. In the end, the narrative is still about like these two girls that died on the mountain a year ago.
Josh's
and, like,
relatives.
Yeah, Josh's sisters. And like the story's still about that. In a weird way, like, but all the stuff about like evil spirits and stuff all comes back to the fact that like, oh, one of his sisters is like an evil like nightmare monster now.
Right. It doesn't short circuit its own stakes by yanking the rug out from under you in a way that completely recontextualizes the game, but just in a way that says like the information we gave you was always right and you always had enough to like work it all out, but it's probably a little different than you think it is.
Right, yeah.
And that's like really clever writing that you don't even see in like, I mean, you definitely don't see that in trashy horror, but like you don't even necessarily see that in like good horror that emulates trashy horror.
Sure, yeah. It's just propulsive.
Right.
Like it makes you want to like keep playing it. Like
Yeah, it's very compelling.
Yeah.
This was like sometimes like we'll play games and I'll be like, all right, like I have to play this for the podcast, but this was a game where I was like excited to come back to it consistently and like play through it some more.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's just interesting, like you said, like the way that the narratives are all interwoven but always like separate. Like after the initial section of the game where like all of the crew are together, like none of the whole gang is never brought back together, and there's just something so interesting about the way the game keeps you constantly on your toes by switching that up. Also, apparently, I read this online. I don't know if it's like actually true, but thinking back, I think it is. Matt and Sam never like formally interact.
Really?
Yeah,
That's funny.
I know. They just, and it makes sense because you have actually like the two circles of friends, and this is actually good because I want to talk about like the character development.
Sure.
But you have like kind of like the two circles of friends that you see form, and they have like they're tied together by like Josh and Sam, but like there's not a lot otherwise that like coheres them, and you can kind of see that play out in how they interact.
It's an actual like big friend group where there's like not everyone is best buds with everyone else. It's like, oh, like this person like is friends with this person and this person dated this person.
Yeah.
And like, yeah.
Yeah. Ooh. I'm just remembering Emily. She's such a great, terrible person.
Yeah.
But so the character development is like really surprisingly solid for a game all about like, you know, sex like hungry
sex
teens
crazed teenagers
in a cabin getting picked off one by one. So like one of the things that I realized, I think I was watching somebody play through the game again and I noticed it. Like there's like little things, like for instance when Mike, so the event that precipitates the death of the two girls, Hannah and Beth.
Yeah, I think so.
Is that the gang, or like 5 out of the 8 members of the gang, pull like a horribly mean prank in which they basically like use Mike, who's like the sexy jock, to like he like writes a note to I think Hannah and is like,
yeah,
hey Hannah, like you're so
babe,
sexy, like
you want some fuck. Yeah,
basically. And then she, you know, she's obviously interested in this, so she like comes to see him, and like actually all of the friends are there like watching, and like I don't really know.
It's not really clear what the end game is.
Honestly, makes me like brings me back to like Josh's weird thing about sex. It makes me there's something going on. There, but I don't really know what it is, and I don't know if I want to know. But basically, yeah. And so the girls freak out, or the girl freaks out naturally, and she runs off, and her sister goes off to find her, and that's how they die. But the thing that was really funny to me was like, so Mike's line when Hannah comes into the room, or Beth, I don't remember which one is actually interested in him.
Sure.
Is like, why don't we start with some making out, and like we'll see how things go from there.
Yeah.
And then later, a year later, but you know, in the story, a couple of chapters later, when he and Jess are, you know, like starting to flirt some more in their secluded cabin that they walked like 3 miles to get to. That's a great sequence in general. And he says the exact same thing. He does the thing where he's like, why don't we start with some like making out, and we'll see how things go from there. And there's just something about like the way that characters act so consistently.
He has the one line that he just uses.
Right. That he uses, and it always like works because he's like the hot jock.
Right.
And then and there's just like other things about like the way that characters always interact. Like Sam is kind of like the strong, independent and like kind character of the game. Like she's probably, I would argue, the strongest moral center you have for the game, and like she was the one person who wasn't involved in the prank that got those girls killed.
Right.
And you can see like Emily's anger and like how nasty she is actually borne out if you pay attention to like elements of anxiety that she has, that like Mike, who was her ex, is able to see when she's like starting to lapse into like a panic attack. And like there are all these like little things that are really nice, smart human details that play out in a really consistent way that make these characters actually like engaging, even when they're awful people, or even when they are just like archetypal, you know, teens in a slasher. There's something really actually compelling about the way that they're written.
Well, so that's kind of interesting, right? Is that the game never really like, every time you're playing as a character, like you never really just take in information. Like you take in information through the lens of like the person you're playing as.
Right.
Like,
including clues.
Yeah. So like you'll always get like commentary from whatever character you're playing as, like what they think about it, you know, something, even if it's just like, huh, this is weird. But like it never feels like your perspective is just interchangeable, because you're always getting some kind of like something, like whether it's like someone being squeamish at you know, finding a body, or like Mike, you know, trying to, you know, keep up a false sense of bravado when he's like wandering through a Wendigo infested like sanitarium type thing, and you know, it just allows a lot of like moments for like incidental character growth. Mm-hmm. And like it does like a good thing that like I think is hard to strike a balance of, where it offers you choices of how the characters can behave, but both of those choices are within the realm of like what you would expect those characters to do.
Right.
Like there's never like a like be really humble and honest and like let down all your guard as Mike, or there's never like a
be a totally nice person as Emily, who like is completely vulnerable and
right, yeah. And that kind of stuff is like a hard balance to pull off, but like I think it works.
Yeah. And I think actually like going back to the idea of multiple characters, I think that may be one of the ways that the game that the game's strength plays out over other typical choose your own kind of path narrative games, is the fact that you are constantly kept in all these different shoes. And so that's another way I think that the game kind of carefully corrals you towards its conclusion without ever feeling rote. I wouldn't say, I mean, there are elements of the game that feel predictable, but by and large, it never feels like super predictable, and it never feels out of character either. Like you said, like everything is always within the realm of reality for what would these characters all be doing.
Sure, yeah.
And that's a way that that's a trick that the game has, that it can present information to you in different ways. So it's not always just through the lens of an individual character with an individual moral compass. And I think that might be like one of the ways that it's stronger than other typical games like that.
Yeah, it utilizes its perspective well. I just keep thinking of like I was trying to like think of like how Heavy Rain does that, and all I can think of is just like
Sean!
like no, all I can think of is Nam and Jaden like looking at all these fucking clues and just being like, how will this help me find the killer?
Yeah.
A child is going to die. Like,
I need my drugs.
yeah.
Yeah, it really is stark, the comparison, I think, of how do you... I mean, you know, I would never say that... I wouldn't ever. I wouldn't say that this game is, like, a super mature or, like, emotionally, like, heavy game.
No, but it's well constructed.
Right, but it's well constructed and does the teen slasher thing in a very compelling way. And I think that's, like, something that a drawn-out, super... you know, fartsy game like Heavy Rain like fundamentally can't understand, because it instead of investing all of that energy into making these different perspectives engaging and consistent and meaningful, it actively does the opposite, because that serves a narrative, you know, nefarious purpose.
Right, yeah. It I mean, it also helps that like the writing here is just so much stronger in general.
Oh yeah.
Like
and it is admittedly like English is the native language of like the actors and stuff. Like for Heavy Rain, I understand that was because it was originally
it's also
French.
true.
So you get, you know, there might be some translation between French to English that cuts down on impact.
Yeah, but like it there's
I
also
don't know why am I defending Heavy Rain? The game sucks.
there's also no crazy split screen bullshit in this either. Like it's just like, yeah, you're just playing this character. Like we don't need to do anything like ridiculous or elaborate.
Right.
Yeah, and I also just want to briefly touch on the therapist sequences.
Oh man, I totally forgot about it.
They're so good.
Yeah,
like I love them
Peter
so much.
Stormare, yeah.
Like they're just such a like. There's this trend of like therapists in horror games. It's like this, and also the therapist in Silent Hill: Shattered Memories, who are just real bad at their jobs. And like it makes sense in this one because like he's like a manifestation of Josh's like crazed mind.
Right, like the therapist is real, but this version that you interact with and actually directly impacts like the scenes you'll see in the games based on what you think is scary to him.
Right, yeah.
He's just a manifestation, right, of Josh's like
yeah.
off his meds hallucination.
But he's so like actively trying to like incite panic attacks, basically like, tell me what you think is scarier, like like, interesting choice. Like, I wonder what that says about you.
Right.
And it slowly just turns to, you monster, what have you done?
Yeah,
like,
there's like the scene where he literally is just like, psychopath!
Yeah.
And I'm like, man, like, that whatever Josh is paying that therapist is absolutely more than he deserves as, like, a mental care.
Well, one thing I think is funny is if you evade Josh as Sam and you get to, like, explore, like, the workshop where Josh set things up, you can find Josh's phone, and
Right.
you can find messages from his therapist saying like, "Hey, Josh, like, just so you know, I don't think this is a super good idea," and like,
Because he knows about the whole Josh.
yeah, because
pretending to be
apparently
a serial killer.
apparently Josh has told his therapist about this, and like, I'm pretty sure it's a thing that like when you're afraid your patient will endanger others, you can like let an official know.
absolutely, yeah.
But like, it's funny because I think in this world there's like a reasonable therapist out there for Josh somewhere, and then he's just warped into this like, and it does do something that I really enjoy, which is like, you're not clear like what context this therapy thing is happening in. At first, you think it's like some out of game thing because like the therapist keeps referring to like this game you're playing. I
Right.
can't do the accent well, but like,
Well, yeah, it's a very Peter Stormare accent.
Yeah.
It's just like, this game you're playing.
yeah, and you think it's like it's some meta thing, but then like it gets weirder and,
it kind of
weirder.
is.
Yeah, but it gets weirder and weirder. Like it starts as a normal therapist office, and then like the lights dim, and then there's like a beating heart on the desk, and then the windows are boarded up, and there's wet cobwebs in the corner, and like
There's like bodies laying around.
Yeah.
It's just. And the therapist always just he after he's done talking, he's like, "Well, we're out of time." He just like goes over to like look out the window.
He just leaves and stares at the window. Like he doesn't like say goodbye. He's just like, "We'll talk later," and then just leaves. But it's like it's such a. I love that kind of like weird like actually like creepy stuff that you don't draw attention to. Like this room doesn't seem entirely right. Like and it just keeps getting like more and more
stark.
not right. Yeah.
Right. And like when the game does veer into like actually trying to scare you, it's actually also still pretty good.
Yeah.
Like the scene when you find, because you don't actually control Josh for most of the game basically, and then the first time you control Josh, you actually see like what he experiences, which again is a really like smart use of having multiple characters and like using that perspective, and you just see like this nightmare like pig creation monster that like vomits up its intestines, including his like dead sisters at him.
Yeah.
And it's just absolutely horrifying.
Yeah. It's
And
really good.
Right. And it's just it's that ability to actually, even after all the stuff that we've been like playing through with this game where we think we've seen all of its tricks, it still like actually manages to do something still different.
Yeah, it understands both. It doesn't actually employ like creepy, like unsettling horror a lot, which I think is like the correct choice, like in terms of, because that's not the kind of story it is, but it like
Right.
leans into it sometimes. But like it's also really good at like slasher horror too, and like those like sequences of like running away from killers or monsters are like very like they're very tense. Like the amount of interactivity from you is just right, and they never overstay their welcome either. They're never like, you'll have points like, oh god, please let that be the last one, but you're never like, all right, I'm tired of this, like
Right.
please just stop.
I mean, not to go back to Heavy Rain, but like I was like that after just trying to pour like a glass of orange juice. But yeah, this
Put the
game.
plates on the table.
Right. Well, I mean, okay. Admittedly, when I was trying to take the groceries from his wife, I was purposefully messing it up, and eventually she just got tired of me
Yeah.
and left me.
Yeah, she divorced you on the spot, saving Jason's life.
But yeah, what do you think there are elements like? What do you think are elements of the game that could have been done better? Do you have any like significant complaints?
I mean, not a bunch. It's one of those things where like, I guess there are like individual sequences that like could have been done better or
Sure.
something, but also like, it's one of those things where it feels like nitpicky to like say like, oh, like you could have like written this scene better. Like it's
Right.
That's a tough. I mean, I don't know. Do you?
I don't know. I don't think I do either. I mean, like there are obviously right, like you said, like nitpicky things that I could say. Things I could be like, the frame rate was bad, which it actually was, and like gave me a headache at one point.
Yeah, which does seem weird. Like it was just a PS4 exclusive for
Right.
a while. It
Like
might
this-
still be.
Oh yeah, well I don't know if it's PS exclusive for sure.
Sure.
Yeah, and I mean I think given the fact that this is like I would argue this is it's not necessarily an argument thing, but this is like I would say one of the highest budget like horror games to have been created.
Sure. Yeah.
I think there are like elements of that could have been employed more effectively. But like as far as enjoying this game as a piece of narrative art that I got to interact with and that basically tickled every fancy that I ever have as like a big horror nerd, it was like just a really good time. Yeah, I mean, I think there were, the game does balance the interactivity and like just kind of like walking around bits
Right.
a bit. I think that could have. I think there's always room for improvement with like how exactly to balance that. But like by and large, I really don't have any like major complaints that I think are like this would have changed the game to like the next level.
Yeah, I mean,
More Rami Malek.
there's a couple scenes that are a little ridiculous, like the scene where Matt and Emily come across the murderous like herd of deer, and that it has nothing to do with anything, but like they just get surrounded by a herd of deer.
Oh yeah, you're right. That doesn't.
And if you like kill one of the deer with an axe, like they'll stampede and kill Matt. Or both of them.
I think. Yeah, you're right. It could be both of them.
But like, and like there are a couple scenes like that where it's just like, all right, you didn't need to like.
But at the same time, again, like being that playing into that ridiculous like tropey
Sure, yeah.
horror movie, like I can think of horror movie like that Italian cannibal movie that I watched with the kid that's a dwarf, but he's actually
Yeah.
supposed to be an underage kid. Like there are just like some weird elements in those movies sometimes where you'll just be like watching, you're like, what am I watching?
Right.
And like I could see this fitting into that, and that's why I think like I could see this game becoming more of like a cult game, because when it came out, like reviews were I would say like hesitantly positive. But I think like as more people kind of dig into the unique, very schlocky horror that it plays and how well it does that,
Right.
I could see that being like something that a lot of fans kind of return to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's I feel like it isn't talked a lot, but it talked a lot about, and like I'd kind of forgotten about it too. But then like revisiting it, I was like, man, this is like really solid. And
Right.
like
In the ways that are like interesting to me, both as a horror fan and as like a person that enjoys like, narrative and character work like this.
right, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Do you have anything else you want to add about Until Dawn?
No, I don't think so. It's fun as hell, and like
Yeah. And more fun, I think, probably like under influence of like alcohol or something in a group of friends. Like, I could see this being like a really amusing party game.
It's really fun to play with people, and don't get me wrong, like it's great to play like by yourself too. But
Sure.
like
to be able to like be simultaneously a controller and like a viewer of it.
yeah, right, because it still functions as like a horror movie, except like
You're watching your friends do it.
The person you're like, don't go into the basement, is sitting there in the room with you.
Right,
Like,
exactly.
and it's great.
Yeah.
That's
It was a good time. It was a surprisingly good time, I think. Because I went into it kind of having a little bit of hesitation based on reviews, just being like how, like, how much like a typical, like, boring narrative game will this be if also the writing isn't actually, like, emotionally compelling.
yeah, right.
But it still actually, like, plays out those stakes pretty well.
Yeah, and I think in like a month and a half, their next game is coming out.
There's also, let me look up to verify this, but I think there's also, like, an arcade version
Yes,
of this. There
Until
is, right?
Dawn: Rush of Blood.
Yeah, there's like, which I guess maybe that's where you're like, okay, like, what exactly are you? What do you think you did right about this game that you think would be done right in an arcade game?
Yeah, but they do have the Inpatient coming out in
Yes.
a month and a half, which is like a straight up VR horror game. Which like I'm there for that.
That's
like,
gonna be like a prequel.
yes,
kind of.
it
Yeah, 60
takes,
years in the sanitarium, I think.
right, which seems like pretty cool. Like
Right,
I
that
would
could
be
be
happy to see
compelling.
them do actual horror, or like I don't know. I'm not exactly clear what kind of game it will be. I don't
Right.
think it'll be the same as like
Yeah, I don't. If it's VR, I can't imagine it's gonna be as like heavily interactive in the narrative, like third person sense.
right. Yeah, but like I'm looking forward to it. Like these guys are. I have this issue with them. They're called Supermassive, and I always get them confused
With Supergiant.
With Supergiant.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Bastion and Until Dawn.
very
are-
similar games. Both about
Well, I guess they are both like dynamic games, technically, right?
yeah.
Like,
Would Until Dawn be improved with Bastion's narrator over everything?
and
Like,
Darren Korb's music.
Mike tries to get Jess to take her shirt off. Kid ain't having much luck though. And he's got like creepy like innuendos like Josh does. Like,
Oh, yeah.
can't wait to watch some of this. Huh?
Ooh, I like this. Let's make this game.
We just need to.
Supermassive Giant Games creates
We don't even-
Until Bastion.
We don't even have to make a game. We just have to make an audio track for the game
That's
that already
true.
exists.
That's true.
Desired thing.
Even more limited artistic input since we can't even do podcasts, right?
Yeah. Christ. All right. Yeah.
Well, hey. Yeah, so check out Until Dawn. I think we both have very positive ideas of it. So yeah, this has been Press F to Discuss. I'm Matthew.
I'm Jared.
And join us next week where we'll be talking about Slaughterhouse Pork, a VR pig murdering game. It's going to be exclusive to HTC Vive. Until next time, it's the Dark Souls of podcasts.